Handicap the Republicans for me.
I can't. You know, who knows? The last time I handicapped Republicans, I thought Ronald Reagan was going to get blown out by Jimmy Carter, so I gave up.
Well, up until the last minute, you would have been right. But surely you've watched the Tea Party and the momentum of the Tea Party overtake the Republican Party's momentum.
Sure.
And watch Sarah Palin, among others, be catapulted to a
Sarah Palin could be the nominee, but she could also win. So you
do believe she could win?
I do.
Really? Do you believe she's qualified to be president?
No.
Do you believe she's electable?
Yes.
Now, a lot of Republicans don't think she's electable.
Oh, well, I think you better not ever say that, because you get surprised by campaigns and all kinds of funny things happen in campaigns that you don't expect. Right. If you told me 3 weeks ago that we were going to lose 60 House seats, I would have told you you're nuts.
Really? You were that optimistic up until the end?
I was.
Right. So you think that Palin is a real possibility?
I think she is.
What would the scenario be? Sketch it out for us that would get her
pretty straightforward. You go to Iowa. She's a huge celebrity. If she can organize well, because being a celebrity is not enough in Iowa.
Right.
You have
to organize.
The case,
Jennifer Lopez would be president.
That's right. Yeah. But you've got to organize really well, and if she does the organization and she wins in Iowa, and it depends who else is running. If there are other very conservative, social conservative types, then it's harder. But if she's the only one, if Mike Huckabee doesn't run, and you've got the more corporate types, Perry and Romney and whomever else.
You consider Perry a corporate type, Rick Perry, the governor of Texas.
He looks the type part, doesn't he?
Well, but looks are deceiving.
They are. Indeed, they are.
Do you view him as a formidable candidate if he gets in?
I view every Republican, any Republican who gets the nominee as a formidable candidate. Because they are well organized, well disciplined, and they run good campaigns, even if they can't govern with a damn after they get in.
Right. But of course, in '96, following the then historic losses in '94, when everyone said, "Oh, Bill Clinton's a one-term president," the Republicans didn't really mount much of a challenge to Clinton in the person of Bob Dole. Isn't it possible that a similar thing will happen?
Sure,
this time?
It's always possible. I think that the history is full of people who underestimated their opponents, and I don't do that.
Right. You choose not to. What advice do you give? There are a number of people similar to your situation in '03 and '04. Governors of states relatively unknown to the rest of the country. Mitch Daniels in Indiana, Haley Barbour in Mississippi. What advice do you give? Because you really did run an insurgent campaign for the time. What would you tell them to do if they wanted to get out there?
I think you have to have a very strong message that has to appeal to people. Our message was, you matter, that this is about personal empowerment, and that we're not going to be run over by a government, and we're not going to be run over by our own party anymore. And it was a very powerful message. I would tell anybody who's thinking about doing this seriously, if they're well organized enough and they have a really powerful message, that they should do it, no matter how small the state is.
Okay. Let me use now literally the remaining time talking about not politics but policy, and specifically health care. Mm-hmm. You are Dr. Dean, and you know something about this issue.
I do. We in fact have universal health care for kids in our state, everybody under 18. We've had it for 20 years.
Is that something that could practically be expanded to the rest of the country?
Hell yeah.
Do it for us.
You know who was the first person who, just for the record here, Barack Obama's health care bill is nothing new. Mitt Romney signed one just like it 4 years before.
Indeed, and Rick Perry, governor of Texas, is attacking Romney care the way he attacks Obamacare.
He may well be, but the number of insured adults in Massachusetts is 96%. The last time I looked in Texas, it was about 68%. So I think Perry has a few little explaining to do to the ordinary working people of this country.
Right, but what the people who oppose...
That's why I said he was the corporate type. He evidently cares about corporations more than average people.
Well, what the people who oppose that kind of health care plan say is, yes, but the cost. So high.
Yes, but the cost. So you fix the cost. That hasn't been done, and needs to be done. And in Massachusetts, they're actually working on a solution that is real reform, which is to get rid of fee-for-service medicine and put in a global capitated system.
How'd you do it in Vermont?
Well, we use Medicaid, so we have control over the rates. We expanded how much they pay. We basically made Medicaid a middle-class entitlement for kids. If you're a parent, you can pay, I don't know what it is now, but it was $450 a year, and everybody in your family got health insurance through Medicaid. And in order not to put the pediatricians out of business, we bumped their rates. The other thing we did is we told insurance companies that you will insure everybody who applies for you with this is all the pre-existing condition stuff, and you won't charge them more than 20% above your cheapest rate, which is why I thought the Senate bill was so awful, because it's 300%.
You told them, you mandated to insurance companies.
Yeah.
And how'd they react?
The bad ones left the state, and we have a good and perfectly good insurance market, as good as most anybody else's.
Is that an option nationally?
No, because it's just too conservative. The insurance companies have too much power in Washington. But we did it in Vermont 20 years ago, and it worked fine.
So had you been President Dean during these last 2 years, and you had put a health care plan bill forward that you would have been happy with? What would you have included?
It would have, first of all, it would have had a Medicare buy-in. We would have let people under 65 buy into Medicare, and the reason for that, it would have been really inexpensive, and you could have run it through reconciliation, because it was expansion of existing programs, and it would be a lot simpler. Second of all, we probably wouldn't have had an individual mandate. We also probably wouldn't have had so many insurance rules, because once you put Medicare on the exchange and let people choose that if they want to, all of a sudden they can now buy into a plan that doesn't kick you off if you get sick, doesn't refuse your entry if you are sick. You can take anywhere you want in the country, and you don't lose your insurance if you lose your job. The private sector would have had to compete with all that. Then they would have cleaned up their act in a big hurry without too many complicated regulations. It's a lot simpler.
Right. And any other aspects of what would have been the Dean bill that are not in the Obama bill?
So basically, look, in this country, we have three kinds of medical care. We have socialism. 25 million people are in a socialist system. It's called the Veterans Administration. Those who served their country are in the best system in the country. Rated so by their patients. It gets the highest rating of any system in the country is the VA. Right. And it's a socialist system, owned by the government, run by the government. The doctors are paid by the government. Secondly, we have a big single payer in this country, twice as big as Canada. It's called Medicare. Anybody who's over 65 has a single payer and is in a single payer. And thirdly, we have a couple of 100 million people in the private sector. Let them choose. Why scream and yell about socialism and all that stuff? We already have it. Right. Let people choose. The way to reform things is not to reform them in Washington, because Washington never reforms anything. All I want is for Washington to give us enough choices so we can vote with our feet and do the reforms ourselves. And if you'd given people a choice of what they wanted to sign up for, they would have made that choice. The ordinary person in America would have taken the health care they wanted, and that would have reformed the system.
You're really done in politics?
No, I'm not done in politics.
Are you going to run for something again?
I have no idea, but I'm certainly not done in politics.
But the politics is the running part. You're not done in policy, I'm sure. But so
I'm not done in politics either. I just spent the last 2 months running around campaigning and raising money for 30 Democrats.
But what about running?
Some of whom actually won.
Some who. But what about running yourself?
You never say never in politics.
Well, sometimes you say never.
Well, I didn't say never.
So you would potentially.
I'm not thinking about it. I'm not planning it. I think you have to have your head examined. The first time you run for president is easy because you have no idea what you're getting into.
The
second time you know what you're getting into, and you probably ought to see a psychiatrist first.
But you're not foreclosing on that.
I'm not foreclosing anything.
Okay, very good, Dr. Dean. Thank you for coming to see us.
It's my pleasure.
Great to see you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Next time on Overheard.
The assumption was that somebody who came from the left wing or even the center of the Democratic Party was someone who could not be trusted to govern the country. What that really meant was they didn't want anybody to govern the country.
Right.
Original fictional voices come along only a few times in a generation. This is why a writer like Jonathan Franzen creates the excitement he does.
Funding for Overheard with Evan Smith is provided in part by Hilco Partners, Texas Government Affairs Consultancy, and its global healthcare consulting business unit, Hilco Health, and by the Matson McHale Foundation in support of public television, and also by MFI Foundation, improving the quality of life within our community, and also by the Alice Kleberg Reynolds Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.